All right, you should be good, Sherry, whenever you'd like to start.
Hello.
Okay. No. Oh, hello, Nicola.
Hi there.
Okay, this is the Housing Advisory Commission for Tuesday, February 16th, 2021. I call the meeting to order. We have no minutes because my computer broke.
Uh-oh.
So I am moving. I would, however, like to have a roll call since I'm on a phone and I'd like to know who's here. So I can see Nicola. And I heard that Bud was here. Is that correct?
Yeah, Steve.
Steve is here. Okay, Shauna's here. Jason's here. And Sam and me. Okay. There's Bud. Thanks, Bud. Okay. Item 2, new business. Prep for evening work session with City Council. Sam?
Yeah, so it's going to be presented tonight by Patrick Bowen, who was the primary researcher. He had a staff. There was at one time 8 or 10 different people working with Bowen National Research, working on this housing needs analysis for the city. So Zach and I provided the initial data and kind of parameters for the study based on some input from this group as well. But they really did the bulk of the work. We anticipated doing more of the work kind of as it progressed, but it kind of fell back into more of their normal mode of them doing really the majority of it. We just basically said what we did not want included or what we wanted included, and some customization based on your input, and that's what we got, and really got a great bargain on it. We actually budgeted $50,000, and a study like this we had kind of planned on spending between 30 and 40, and it cost the city 17,000. That was one of the questions that had come up over the weekend from Councilor Southard, so I'd responded to that for the city. So probably not something that would we want to spend a lot of time on tonight as far as what the cost of it was, but more of what we're going to do from here on out. So I sent the slides, or 28 slides, and as you know, it's a very data intensive report. So the goal of Patrick is to spend about the first 20 to 25 minutes of the work session going through those slides, and then that would still leave about 20 to 25 minutes for questions and comments, primarily from council members. But of course, if there's things from HAC members also that you want to comment on or contribute, and then that would leave a 5 or 10 minute buffer before the regular meeting starts. So that's it for me. You all have probably glanced through it before. So there's a couple charts in there that are very telling. But there's also, I know we spent a lot of time talking about housing affordability on the lower income end of the spectrum, but this report is done by a researcher who shows what the market would support also, based on sales and rents happening in the region and in the locality. So that's not something we've spent a lot of time talking about, and I think that's a helpful kind of comparison as we talk to or hear about investors. Is they're looking for what the market supports. That's all of those things in one package, if you will. So is there anything different you would like to do, a different way you would like to do it, based different than that, or does that sound okay? All right.
Comments?
Everyone's giving a thumbs up, Sherry. I know you can't see everyone on the screen.
Okay, that's
on a phone, but
that's great. Yeah. Terrific. Thanks, Sam. Anything else you want to add?
No, nothing. I'll be advancing the slides, and Patrick will be doing most of the talking. So no, there's nothing else I would add. I know probably the elephant in the room is going to be, okay, what are we going to do now? And we don't really have the answer to that tonight. We do know that there's housing projects in the pipeline. We know that there's a comp plan update being done, that's going to talk about, but a lot of this is really going to be up to the market. And Sean and I have been talking about incentives a little bit, and I know the council goals that floated to the top as well. as far as, and some policies on incentives and disincentives. So yeah, those are good. Those are going to be the action steps. And Patrick had some things on that in his report as well, about some different strategies to influence where the needs are. So, but obviously tonight we're not going to try to solve that. But it does bring the information more into public awareness. So Age Friendly Oxford's been doing a lot on this as well.
So with this report and what's coming in the pipeline, is there a way to sort of cross-reference it so that we can see how it's applicable to what Bowen sees as the future?
Yeah, we could do that for a future meeting, because this study was done before those projects came in the pipeline. So we would need to update some of those charts. And we don't intend to do that tonight, but
No,
yeah.
of course.
But yeah, that's right. We could take some of those charts and update them according to I'm calling it's around 280 dwelling units that are in the pipeline right now.
I'm sorry, I haven't been able to familiarize myself much with the study yet. What kind of numbers did it indicate that we could or should be adding, and how do those two compare?
Yeah, let me pull that up here. There is a chart that, actually, I think I can put it on the screen for you. That'll make it simpler for everybody. The executive summary is actually not very executive because it's pretty long. It's about 30 pages. So there's a chart in there that has a table of, I think there's 6 rows in it.
Yeah, millennials and seniors were the markets for need.
Okay, it's opening up PowerPoint now.
I think it's slide 27 for those who have the PowerPoint, I think.
Okay. Sherry, you probably can't see that, but
Well, I've got it on my other screen, so I'm fine. Thanks.
good. Okay. So Steve, there's the 6 rows there. That's the one I was referring to. And Jason, yeah, that's the exact same one I was thinking of. So on the lower income, under $1,000 a month rent, there's market support through 2025 for 323 units. And on the for sale end, on the upper end, for purchase price 260,000 and up, there's demand for 221 units between now and 2025.
Yeah, this would be what I'd like to see cross-referenced with what's coming in on the pipeline.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be the bottom 2 rows on the for sale between 160 and then on up over 260. And then it will start to touch into the top row of 323 units. There's a possible development of 50 units that would be under 1,000. They're in the $600 to $800 a month rent for senior housing. So yeah, that'd be a good one to update. I appreciate you bringing it up.
I have a question for you, Sam. On that high-end upscale for sale homes where it says 221 units, Does that count what can potentially be built? Both in the, oh gosh, I forget the name of it, but what's being built by Heritage, and then some of the holes that are still over like in the Honor Lane kind of area, like
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think it does. There's a chart in the pipeline, but I can ask Patrick before the meeting to see if it included, because I don't remember sharing that information with him, Shauna, about, I think there's 50 houses and only 2 have been built so far.
right.
So yeah, I'll have to ask him about that. I don't think it does. So that would reduce that number quite a bit if those 47 or 48 more were included.
Okay, thanks.
So in terms of advocacy for us, if that becomes, I mean, if it fits with one of our goals, it's still the lower income and workforce housing where we know we're going to have the biggest uphill battle. And that will also be in terms of trying to find land for it, plus the developers, but we know we have the people, so, wow.
Yeah, one of the
So-
things I had asked Patrick's team to do when they talked to the property management companies was to, since they were surveying them anyway about their vacancies and their occupancy rates, is to ask them to kind of assess their employees as far as if their employees were having difficulty themselves. And that by and large, they found that the employees chose to live outside of Oxford for other reasons besides the housing cost. So that's a fairly small data pool, but it still was good to get that as part of their existing interviews they were having with those property management companies.
But again, remember that you can live outside of Oxford and still attend a Talawanda school district, and people with families are more interested in the school district probably than the municipality.
Could be true. Yeah, it's a big district. You're right. But for households without children, it's still very possible that housing costs could be a part of the equation as to the reason why they're not living in Oxford. So yeah, a lot of factors to consider for sure.
Any further questions for Sam? Okay, let's move on to old business. Item A, transitional housing and cold sheltering update. Nicola, is that you?
Yes, I think so. The shelter is still at full capacity, and we are paying for 2 additional people for the last 2 to 3 weeks, just because of the cold situation in February. The Oxford Social Justice Committee reached out to us to find out if the shelter could be extended. And they said that they had some funds and they were willing to raise additional funds for it to be extended at least till the end of March. So they've been working on that and we've been working with them. So we still have a couple more weeks to make that decision depending upon the funding. And then we also reached out to the Oxford police and, let them know that, especially during this month, if they found anyone homeless on the street, that they could directly take them to one of the places, either the Budget Inn or the Butler Inn, and then we would, talk to the people the next day and figure out stay and so on and so forth. So that's the update for the cold shelter.
Great. Any questions for Nicola?
I can add a little to how this relates to the recent city council retreat where we went over goals. Actually, Sam, do you think we should share the results of that in terms of what's in progress and the goals that were highlighted?
Yeah, I can put that on the screen if you would like.
Yeah, if you could do that, that would be great.
Will do.
Yeah, so at the retreat, we sort of came up with 3 very big goals, but many goals beyond that. But the top 3 ones were housing for everyone, right? Which is what we were just talking about, was at the top. But I tried to make explicit that myself and several other counselors wanted to address the shelter and making it sustainable going forward indefinitely if we could. That sort of got tied in though, and I worry that it might get lost as a priority. So that's something we should keep up on. But the good news is that council is behind addressing the housing issue in general, finding funds for the housing fund to, revenue for the housing fund to do some of the things we need to do, but also supporting the shelter program we have in, evaluating it, and trying to sustain it going forward. Now, I'm sure that might include, as is happening right now, some of the efforts with using our community resources in terms of philanthropy to help support it. But it's hard for that to be consistent. So I hope the city can contribute as much as possible.
So
Yeah,
Jason,
Thank you.
on city council, are they aware that Shauna's working hard on this point of trying to find incentives?
Oh, actually, that's a good question, because I had that knowledge, but I just didn't talk about it much. I sort of assumed it was there, but no, I'm not sure they know how much we're trying to address this. But these are also priorities. So however they get addressed, that gets the job done, I'm sure they approve of. Yeah,
Right, but we don't, my point is that it would be difficult if we had 2 people working on the same thing and doing the same thing at the same time. Coordination might be a good idea.
Yeah, and Sam might be able to address this, but I don't think there's 2 paths separately parallel working on this. This was just a more priorities session of what council wants staff and boards to work on. And also Shauna has her hand up, so she might have something to say on this too.
Do. So I assume, since I am working with Sam, that as this gets worked on, and I know that he's part of the strategic and comprehensive planning process, I assume that city council will be made aware of the stuff that Sam and I are doing. But yeah, I'm definitely, as you know, Jason, I bring it up pretty much every meeting at planning, which does include you and then Dave now as a city council member. So my hope is that the communication is open enough that that city council is aware. That's certainly something that I want to talk about tonight if there's time. So, I don't think that like the work that Sam and I are doing and what Sam is going to, move forward with is going to interfere with the work of anyone else. Sam's kind of the point person, so he's not going to let there be like double efforts. I don't think. That's my opinion. Agreed.
Yeah. I think we're all working together. So thanks everybody for bringing that up. And I see the council goals, and I wasn't able to participate in that. I listened to a little bit of it on YouTube, but I see the council goals as more of a acknowledgement at the top level to allow, resources to be assigned appropriately. And that helps to provide the kind of the backing for staff to move forward. So yeah, I think it's a coordinated effort, Sherry.
Great, that's terrific. Okay, Jason, were you finished, or did you have something more you wanted to say?
I was just going to say, I hope that recognizing that sustaining the shelter options going forward is explicit, and we continue to acknowledge it both in housing and hopefully in city council. Like I said, I was hoping it was more explicit either on our top priority goals or at least in progress, since we are already doing this program. We had a list of things in progress that we're working on, but also I wanted to expand our funding for the future so we can make sure it's sustainable. That's all. So hopefully we keep note of that.
Terrific. Thank
With
you.
a comment.
Thank you.
I really hope that we don't, Jason, try to make this just a city priority. So I don't know how we reach out more and let people in the community know about the situation. I know the Presbyterian Church has a very high priority with its mission work on housing in the community. So I think there's some good synergies that we could begin to develop. And also, although I was going to hold this to new business, but I was able to become acquainted with the woman with First Financial Bank who is in charge of their community services and their, Bud, help me, the community reinvestment funds.
CRA.
Ricky, and I can't think of her last name right now, but she's quite interested in helping us, much worse than my cat is, over my shoulder. But she's quite interested in the issues of Oxford, and I forwarded her the age-friendly Oxford study and pointed out the housing section, and we had just gotten the housing reports. So she has definitely agreed to become a resource to this committee. And she also is involved with recommending some of the use of their charitable funds. So I think it's a relationship that we're going to want to develop and milk.
Yeah, and other groups are also working about addressing this. Like OCPJ recently put out a request for help in supporting this going forward. But also, in terms of grants and philanthropy, it's hard to keep that consistent going forward because everybody has different situations and different causes they need to contribute to. So the more the city can build in the ability to help sustain this going forward, the better. But yeah, if there's room for charities to help with this, absolutely. I mean, what's most important to me is that the citizens of Oxford, get the help they need. They're the most vulnerable. So how we get there is less important to me than getting there and making sure it's sustainable going forward.
So charities working through Family Resource Center wouldn't be the best way to do this, rather than worrying about whether the city could take money or things like that?
Could you say again? Sorry, I think I missed it, Sherry.
The charities working directly through Family Resource Center for this might be a better structure than having them working with the city.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends which instance we're talking about, but yeah, any funds that can go directly to Family Resource Center is a bonus. I'm just worried that our local charities that contribute might not be able to produce the resources necessary indefinitely going forward. And so wherever the city can generate their own funds, either through a housing fund or some other measure, the better, is what I'm saying.
I think Jason's talking about consistency, I guess, in the funding, right?
Right. But
Oh, and Lord knows those of us who have been in nonprofits for a long time know a few tricks about that. But the other side of that coin is there is no consistency ever.
right.
Every year, the budget in a nonprofit is in question.
Yep.
And we get some support from the city for Oxford seniors that goes way back. And I'm really concerned about the report that just came out with the revenue stream for the city being down 10% so far. So as much as I find this to be a priority, I think that even in our loving community, there may be other things that will be demanding of city monies before this. And so that's where I think that we'll need to work. And I agree with Sherry, mostly with Family Resource Center as the hub of the service provision. And whatever help we can get secured from the city on an ongoing basis is terrific. But I believe that's only going to be one block in the foundation, and we've got to think of it in other interesting ways. Besides the fact that we need to have some sense, and I always find this has been good to tell people the general cost of operation, so that people get a sense of what there is, and then if we can begin to talk about potential shortfalls, that's what I've always found encourages donors to step forward and help.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. And that sort of was my point, both in the FRC doesn't know where their funds are coming up from, but also the other charities that could potentially contribute to the FRC doesn't have consistent funding coming in, so they might not be able to donate in the same way every year. And so the more the city can contribute to that in a consistent, sustainable way that we can trust is going to be there, the better. Because ultimately, when we struggle as a city, it's because of conditions that ultimately hurt the group we're trying to address most. So we might have to buckle down in terms of budget, but the people who need to be addressed most when we do that, I think, are the exact people that end up getting helped through the shelter program, if that makes sense.
So Jason, you're looking at a line item? Is that what you're looking at?
I'm not even talking about anything specific. I'm just talking about methods and through any way possible that we can say this chunk of money can be devoted every year to this cause. Right. And if that chunk can grow, that's great. But I want a minimal effort, whatever is required between the city and charitable groups to help fund the shelter going forward. I mean, to me, that's a priority.
So just for the benefit, Jason, for everyone, and I understand where you're coming from and where your position is as one counselor, and Glenn's not here today, but I'm curious if you could shed some light on how the other council members who participated in the goal session, if it was intentionally left out of the little 3-sentence statement that Jessica sent, or if cold sheltering, transitional housing was in there as an all-encompassing. Okay, I'm seeing a head nod, yes. So all-encompassing?
Yeah, so it's all-encompassing. So when we went to do our final voting, we had originally meant to have 7 slots, and we had separated out addressing housing as it's currently listed and addressing the shelter. But when Jessica put it into the survey, which, by the way, we were running out of time, we were already over and we were trying to rush, there were only 6 things put in. And I said, oh, we forgot one. And they said, don't worry, we're going to group it into this other one. And explicitly, Councilors Regu and Snavely also agreed that this was a priority. And I believe there was some head nods from other councilors as well, that this is not just me, but because it wasn't explicit, when you guys read it, you might not read that shelter is part of that housing component, which is why I'm bringing it up right now, basically.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, and if you guys watch the video of that, you'll see what I'm talking about.
All right. Well, Sherry, do you want to move on to Western Knolls?
Sure, and that means it's back in your lap.
Back in my lap. So I know that I say this often, but we are still, believe it or not, making progress on Western Knolls with Episcopal retirement. And the last issue we had to do with some turnover with Episcopal retirement services. There was a staff change, so we're not starting from scratch, but there was some changes there that kind of slowed things down. So we've restarted that process with a new person, but we have the support of the staff that had been there the whole time. And February 1st, in their defense, was a date that they were targeting for an application for funding for another community. So that took a lot of their time in February getting ready for that. So I still have hope that we're going to be able to bring this to council for a purchase agreement, and then that will allow it to move on to Oxford Seniors. And I continue to get inquiries once every week or two about folks that are wanting to do some lower income housing to try to meet that market demand. So I really believe that the study, Age Friendly Oxford, your group here, this group here, has really helped to raise the awareness. So I appreciate what you're doing with that. Steve's got his hand up, Sherry.
Steve?
Well, and in talking about the Western Knolls project with my first financial contact, she has worked extensively with Model Group and Episcopal retirement homes and holds them in very high regard, and said that might be a project they would be interested in supporting specifically. So that I think we have partners out there to tap.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve.
I don't
Okay.
hands raised on Western Knolls.
I'm sorry, who was it?
I don't see any other hands raised on Western Knolls. Terry.
Okay, so moving on to update on housing incentives, Shauna?
Okay, Sam and I met last Wednesday kind of to talk through some of the ideas that we have. He presented me with some more detailed information about Bloomington, Indiana's not mandatory incentives program. It's voluntary. So we just talked through some of what our ideas were. One of the things we talked about was, you know, especially in the mile square, if we give people, you know, an advantage to density setbacks or height or other things like that, that gives them more of an incentive to tear down historic structures that are not protected. So we want to like kind of look at how to maybe protect those particular buildings as part of the process. So we mentioned, like, he said that he was going to get Ben to like legal counsel to investigate the legality of having certain cases head to HAPC before they're allowed to do a tear down of a building. Sorry. And we also talked about, Sam mentioned like simplifying the Bloomington, Indiana program by a lot. He talked about like different types of incentives, like waivers to setbacks or building height or whatever, could be a point system, which probably Sam can explain what he means by that a little bit better. But just that the amount of incentive could, you know, relate to what the developer is looking for as far as waivers. The Bloomington, Indiana, this is an interesting detail. So instead of doing this by dwelling units that are affordable, they do it by bedrooms. And they're in lieu fee for developing incentives is $20,000 a bedroom. So, you know, if we could replicate something like that here, that would be a lot of money that could go to the Housing Trust Fund if they didn't want to pursue the additional, or if they didn't want to pursue putting in the affordable housing units. So that could be a really good source of money. Another thing that I mentioned, because Sam had asked me, well, like what kind of waivers and, you know, make you uncomfortable. And you know, just me on planning in particular, I was talking about how in the mile square, I'm not as concerned about setbacks or whatever as I am with neighborhoods that are outside of the mile square. Because I personally, as a person, don't have a lot of problem with density in the mile square. I like urban environments, and I think that we currently have like this urban environment in Oxford, so that doesn't really bother me. And so what I suggested to him was that BZA and planning can kind of use this incentive program as a way to tell developers you need to either make affordable housing units or you need to you know, provide an in lieu fee. Because right now, planning, and I'm not sure about BZA, but planning is constantly giving waivers for setbacks and other things. Like that's part of what we seem to do with every single PUD that comes in front of us. So I was saying to Sam, well, we could be a lot stronger about this situation. And as a member of planning, I can bring up like, well, you want this setback waiver? Well, we have this incentive program. So instead of being so giving to developers, we can actually have this incentive. So even though it's not mandatory, we can kind of make it mandatory if they want to have these waivers. You know, for us to vote on approval to go to city council. So Sam, did I miss anything about our conversation?
No, you nailed it. I think that traditionally the reason like planned developments are done instead of subdivisions is because they do allow waivers to be granted for height or setback or lot coverage or open space. Those are those dimensional factors that you have to comply with when you're doing a planned development. But the whole reason for doing a planned development is because it's an odd shaped property or there's an environmental resource there that that the developer wants to protect, or at least explain that that's the reason. So here I think I see an opportunity that Shauna has pointed out, which is, okay, if planned developments have traditionally been done as having an environmental benefit, or because of a odd configuration of a property that's difficult to develop, then there could be a housing cost benefit. And if that housing cost benefit is not being provided, then the waivers don't have to be granted. And so I think this sets the table for that that very strong guidance for developers. So it's not really a denial. It's this, we set this program up for you to take advantage of. And if you're not offering a benefit to the community, then the waivers don't have to be granted. You can just do the traditional development, the non-discretionary review, or what we call the by right development. So I think it's legally more palatable for the city. If you remember the conversation with Attorney Ben Mazer, but it still gives guidance, and it shows the development community what we want to see happen. So it seems like a good compromise. And obviously we don't have it written up yet, but I think we have some good dialogue going.
How do you think city administration is going to be happy? Are they going to be happy with it?
I think if we have the staff to administer it, yes.
Any questions for Sam and or Shauna?
I like that.
Thank you, Steve. Yep, I think you're absolutely right. Okay, before we adjourn, I would like to welcome Bud Scharf to our group and find out from Mr. Scharf. This was a relatively easy HAC meeting. How did it seem to you?
It seemed great. I mean, it's nice to get back into municipal kind of work. As most of you know, I before I was at Butler Metro, I was worked for the city of Hamilton in community development. So it's nice to get back to that. I see that the same kind of issues and challenges that are facing Oxford are the same everywhere. Maybe with a little twist because of the student population in Oxford, but it seems to be the same thing everywhere. And it's good to be working again with Mr. Schnabel, because I was the guy that Schnabel was always calling about money every year for. So anyway, it's good to be here, and I really look forward to working. So thank you.
That usually came through, so that's why I keep saying that we're underutilizing our community development block grant monies.
Yeah, you got to keep Desmond. You got to keep Desmond busy down at the county. So,
Yep. Well, thank you so much for being willing to be part of our little group here.
absolutely.
Okay, let's move for adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I can move.
Seconded.
Your cat may not like it, Steve. Jason seconds. Okay, roll call. Nicola,
Yes.
Bud,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Shauna,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
and me, yes. That's all of us, right, Sam?
That's all.
Okay, thank you all very much. See you
Hey,
next month.
Sam, could you send me that PowerPoint presentation?
Sure. Yeah, you should have gotten it already.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'll check.
I'll
It
double-
came in, but it came in around 150.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll double check. Then I probably got it.
And I'm
Okay.
sorry, folks, I won't be able to attend this evening. But thank
And-
you and welcome, Bud.
And I
Great to
didn't
work
know
with you.
anything about this evening, and I will try, but I can't promise that I will be there tonight.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.